African Entrepreneurs Podcast.
So today we're going to be talking about Africa and AI and why we're lagging behind in this new AI revolution going on. But first, I think we should introduce myself. My name is Tosin, second year MBA at Haas.
My name is Testimony, second year student at MBA at Haas.
And I'm Ayobami, only year student, master students in engineering, studying material science and engineering.
Yeah, smart guy. Okay, the topic today is like bridging the gap, why Africa lags in AI and the path forward. AI has like three pillars generally. Like there's the data itself, like where all of the training happens and all of the old token happening. And then the compute, the GPUs of the world, the TPUs of the world. And then the model in itself, which is like the breakthrough algorithm and all of that. Africa lags in three of them, at the same time, right? It's not like we have advancements in one and like we're catching up on the other. We lack everything in the three of them. Maybe some facts to back things up, talk about the data. African languages represent less than 1% of the internet content, which means that all of the training data used in ChatGPT and like OpenAI models and Anthropic models, like African languages is 1% of that. Testimony, what do you think about that?
Well, I have two perspectives. It's a good thing and a bad thing. I'll start from the good part. The good part is that we're like a colonized continent. So essentially, language transfer has happened from our colonial masters. Use that. English, French, Portuguese. Those are like, the official languages in Africa now. So in my view, I know it might sound cheeky, but I don't think we are actually behind because the languages we speak in each of these countries is this languages, English, French, and Portuguese. On the other hand, I think a couple of people might talk about the originality of thoughts of our own, languages. And I think that's where the argument is coming from. But in my view, I think we want to focus more on the positives. How can we utilize what we already have to build upon this and find value places or places of value we can be able to capitalize this technology and move forward. And then once we advance in that particular perspective, we can start talking about how do we want to inculcate our own native languages into building models. Yeah,
I see.
That's what I think.
So if I'm getting currently, what you're saying is that we shouldn't inch towards the fact that our semantics and our languages are not in the models right now. Like that's later. Like we should focus on the other things, right?
Yeah. And I know that might be that might be like a hot take, but I'd love to hear what Ayobami has to say maybe from the other points.
Yeah, I mean, I do share some of your thinking. And I think that's if some of the biggest models out there, from Claude to GPT, do not consist a fair share of our language, we have to build ours ourselves. And that also factors in some of the other things you mentioned, because to build models, to train models, you do need the data and the infrastructure. So you first of all need those two set up before you can get the models, right? And for us to set up models, we do need the data and infrastructure, right? So how can we get this, right? There are two options that does come to mind. I mean, government support, right? Like some federal funding, some policies that essentially enables some allowance and funds people who are well versed in setting up data centers, but also collecting data sets, going into villages, harvesting, but collecting a lot of this training data from villages. And because if you look at, Nigeria, for instance, there are, how many languages?
There are about, in Africa, we have 2,000 plus languages.
In Africa, 2,000 plus languages. A bunch, I can bet 70, a huge percentage of that are locked in some village and somewhere that isn't probably connected to the internet. So there needs to be on the ground outreach efforts to go to these places, sort of recruit them some way, somehow, get bunch of these data. I mean, and then a concerted effort to develop like the infrastructure, the GPU clusters and whatnot. And then we can talk about models. Like we can talk about building the models.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
You mentioned infrastructure, which is like very interesting, right?
yeah.
The infrastructure of today that we have away from even the continent are built by hyperscalers, right? The Amazon, the Googles, the
Gotcha.
Microsoft. And then in the African continent, fewer than 15 of those exist, right? Compared to 300 plus in North America and counting, because I'm sure OpenAI is building something somewhere in Texas, right? And Africa accounts for less than 1% of global data center capacity, despite we housing 17% of the world's population. It is this paradox that like bothers me. One, from the perspective of even the people building it, right? Like you would think if Amazon is thinking of data center and you know the way we are being taught in the MBA is to like build strategically. Africa feels like a strategic place to set up a data center, right? Just because a lot of people are there, you have so much data to deal with and all of that. But why do you think this number exists? Why do we have like just 15 data centers in the continent? Why? What's the problem?
Okay, I think a couple of reasons. The reasons are mostly like structural. Let's start from the basics. The first one is electricity. Again, you can't like building data centers when you don't even have constant electricity. It's just like putting the cart before the horse. For Nigeria, for example, Nigeria has the highest number of people that do not have access to electricity in the world.
Whoa.
90 million people don't have access to electricity from Nigeria. A couple of other countries in Africa also have this problem. So, like the core infrastructure, electricity, which powers a lot of things, industrialization, before you even go into the data centers that powers the models that eventually helps you get AI services, it's non-existent. So I think that is like step one. Fixing that is like a step in the right direction. That's the first part. The second part is financing. I know you mentioned that it makes sense for data centers to be located in Africa for a couple of reasons. I think one of the things I also want to add is access to raw materials. I think many of these solid minerals are mined in Africa. For example, cobalt, essentially, I think 70% of the world's supply of cobalt comes from DRC,
Yes.
which is like, a very significant number. Talk about other metals that are useful for batteries, chips, that essentially powers this, they are located in Africa. So it makes sense from that perspective. But another thing again is market. Who's going to pay for this?
Who's gonna pay for
We
it?
barely solved our own problems of having good roads and access to electricity, and then now we're talking about building this. Remember, like this building data centers and everything that comes with it. It requires a huge capex inflow. So I think a couple of these factors that I mentioned: number one, like electricity; secondly, financing; third, markets, and like some of the things that makes up lag in terms of data center build and like implication, artificial intelligence, infrastructure build out, rollout. Yeah. So those are my thought process around that.
And that I mean, I do agree with you, right? Like, cause data is the bedrock of AI. Like, you need data to actually do all of these things, and data is contextualized, right? Like, it's very hard to use OpenAI in the African context, because obviously it's not trained that way.
Yeah.
And like the bias of it being trained on 99% of non-African data means that it is already biased to the continent.
Yeah.
So we need to solve that problem first. But let's leave data a little bit and like go to compute itself. Talk about GPUs. Let's talk about TPUs, all of those things, right? You mentioned now that DRC is the one that gives all of that, right? But the thing is, Africa has less than 0.5% of the world's installed GPU compute capacity. Right. I want to talk about the NVIDIA GPUs, the H100.
Yeah.
A single H100 GPU training run for a mid-sized model cost about $50,000 to $500,000. right? And that's like, I don't know any African institution that can afford that. What can we do? What do you think? What can Africa do to make sure that we actually have access to compute? Or maybe before you even talk about the solutions, and Ayobami, what do you think are the reasons why we just don't have GPUs? America has the China has a lot of them. They're producing them. Why not Africa?
I think, I mean, it all starts from talent, but I feel like there is a huge talent shortage in terms of both the research base and the research capacity that could potentially drive advancement in these areas. Not just like global applicable advancement, but advancement for the African continent. Like, we do have like a couple unique contexts that needs to be factored in, and there needs to be a bunch of research done in that area. So the very first is we do lack like sufficient research talent to push the bedrock of that. But also like there are for the little talents we do have, because I've seen a couple of LinkedIn posts, a couple of persons across Kenya, Nigeria, really pushing model development. But there are also very few opportunities for the talent available, right? And even most of the opportunities available like take people out of the country or out of the continent even, right? So there are relatively few in Africa, local opportunities available to properly utilize the talent we have. And I think the final thing, which I think could be a more long-term view of the things, would be the investment, right? As I mentioned earlier, like I see two different broad sources of funding. We do need private investments. People who occupy the upper echelons of society, contributing in one way or the other to research. But also we do need like some design and redesign of our federal policies to be able to account for the fiscal flow into such endeavors. I feel like there isn't a concerted effort to get that done. So those are the three things I see as the bedrock and the reason for this.
It's just, so from what I hear, is like this is lack of policy, like talent drain, and also the financing, the infrastructure side of it. You wanted to add something, Testimony?
Yeah, and I think what Ayobami said really makes sense. What I wanted to add in that particular regard is there's this thing in economics that is called focusing on your area of competitive advantage. In my opinion, I do not think that fighting within the zone of trying to build a GPU or a TPU compute power is something that, based on the resources we have, publicly available information, I don't think it's an area we might want to focus on.
I see.
I think there are better ways we can be able to approach that particular situation. One of them is partnership. We have these mineral resources already. I think around the design you mentioned, one of the things that we can put in place is, essentially going to partnership with some of these companies that are already cutting edge for them to be able to come and build from here. Maybe not the GPUs or the TPUs, but something as simple or something more forward-looking, like AI in hardware AI like robotics as it progresses. So we can position in that particular regard where we have partnership with some of these companies. They come here, build from here. So that does a lot of things for us. One, we do not just export our raw minerals at their raw states. We essentially have some added value in that particular one. Secondly is skill transfer. The talent pool mentioned. We have that's one of the things you mentioned. I think that's a very educated way, or I think one way we can go around building competence in that particular area. Another part again is like general wealth creation. We become like wealthier than just exporting our current raw materials. I know there might be political undertones around how that might work, but I think it's more of a practical and pragmatic way to go around building that competence around compute power in that particular regard. That's my thought process around it. In addition to some of the things like you mentioned.
Nice. Okay, we've been able to like talk about data, talk about compute, right? My favorite component of AI is the modeling itself, like the
Mm-hmm.
algorithm and the programming and everything is something that I'm involved.
Mm-hmm.
Again, talent, and that is like built by like researchers and all of that, and like talented people. There's a figure I saw online that 70% of African PhD graduates in STEM fields who study abroad never return to the continent. My question is why?
Well, the reason is obvious.
I mean, like, why? Why? I mean, we talk every day, and like we talk about that. One, like, we're here in Berkeley, and like it's amazing. It's an experience we're grateful for, but we know at the back of our mind that the journey doesn't end here, right? So, and I'm sure we're not special. We're not the only ones that think about this. What happens to the 70% of these people that say that I am not coming back? Why do you think you're not coming back?
Well, I think for obvious reasons. Many of them, I believe, they've been to countries where they think that things work better, where they have more opportunities to, exercise their talents and, do great work, especially within the field of AI, which you're talking about. If you're comparing like the US and other like China to the activity within the artificial intelligence space to the activity in Africa, it's a far cry. So for those that are already building stuff within that area to go start from scratch might be a bit difficult because of lack of opportunities. The second part again is lack of policy to even build momentum within that area. That's another thing I think is causing that. But again, I want to segue into something that I think is an important part. I know again this might be a hot take, but I think sometimes personal initiative is also very important when you want to build stuff. Many of the things that was done here was done by a couple of people who started from scratch, even though they work in the system that is better. But I think that more effort should go into personal initiative among these talented people to go back to the continent and get stuff done. And I think a couple of people are doing it. There's this person I met who is already talking about setting up a compute center in Nigeria, partnering with NVIDIA to get some GPUs.
Nice.
Get some GPUs that I don't know how that is going to be done in example, essentially build compute capacity in the continent. And more people like that are, I think this is happening. A couple of people are doing it. Maybe it's not happening at the scale in which we are looking at it, but I think once 1-2 people start doing it, it can inspire a couple of more people to take that personal initiative, take their talents back to the continent and start building that capacity. But I think another way to get a soft landing is maybe before they jump, you can start partnership with research institutions or schools. Just do it in a soft manner, maybe knowledge transfer, teaching, those kind of areas. Just making that effort even while they are here to just set the tone or build that bridge before they. I think that makes it like relatively easier. But yeah, that's just my thoughts around that.
Those are interesting thoughts. I know we always have this conversation where I like come from actually blaming the government and saying the government is not doing the right thing, and like you always remind me to say, hey, like individual has to have a part to play of like we also need to be proactive. We also need to be good Africans to like see this as a collective effort. Which brings me back to something I want to ask you about. You're a researcher, like you've spent the most part of your life, your career, like working on research and engineering stuff. But a staggering data I saw is that African institutions contribute less than 2% of global AI research papers. And this is just contribution. Like this is actually not implementing things. This is like just doing research. Right? Maybe I don't have, I've written only one research paper in my life. I'm sure like you've been exposed to a lot of research. What does it take to write an AI research paper? And why is that we're lagging behind?
Quite interesting question. And it drives the core of like the difference between continents, between the US and Africa when it comes to AI research. I think more often than not, and we most generally do not like to admit this, there is a lot of soft capital that does factor in just how prestigious like research output is from an institution. Like, look at Jeffrey Hinton or top AI leading thought leaders just being around Berkeley, around like even in other institutions in Silicon Valley. That sort of gives a vibe that people can sort of pick on and be like, oh yeah, this is an example of who I want to be, right?
No role models.
Exactly. And I feel like while that inspiring or that inspiration is one thing we do lack in Africa, I feel like that is a core bedrock for sustainable research development. Like we need to have examples of people, and we need to learn from these people. We need our professors to be pushing these things. I mean, right now it falls on us to make those changes, but I feel like that is one reason for the gap. To your point about personal initiative, I think that is the way we can move forward right now. What exactly can we do? First off, the very little talent we have, can we raise funding? Can we get funding to these people? And that's one thing that I'm actually working on, particularly with regards just meeting with some of this like talented people who despite the circumstances are still pushing forward. Is it like trying to build a community around that? That's what like African entrepreneurs at Berkeley, what people given regardless of their background are able to come to a university like this. Like how can we build a community of this that extends even beyond like the Berkeley African community, extends to people that don't have the opportunity we do have. How can we provide them the resources they have, the community, the access to signal, so that they're able to get the inspiration and also like get the energy to put out this research, because there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of approaches when it comes to again, there's a fundamental difference between what makes African in terms of like, let's just talk language models. We have like over 2,000 like separate languages. Each of these languages has like embedded history. Like there is so much that could add to the general corpus of language data if that is included. Like there will be so much more we probably don't have right now. So there needs to be like some more effort into that to really, really mine the resources we have. One other thing I'm thinking about is around also the taking like sort of a pool approach, right? Like right now, there is a lot of funding over the past few years. There's been a lot of funding into startups across the country, and right now there is an emphasis for AI-based startups. I'm trying to pull up the statistics in here. I think from a need-based perspective, when we have a lot of demand for in-African AI capacity from adjacent startups looking to leverage that for healthcare, for agriculture, for defense, Terra AI. I mean, I feel like that would create like a pool, a need for the infrastructure that would create a need essentially, which is what like a global market are looking for. We drive FDI, drive policies, drive this, and help create like wealth. So I feel like there is the trend around like integrating AI with startups, and like the funding going to that and the companies popping up would further, I mean, I'm optimistic to drive the need for building our own AI infrastructure, and I'm really looking forward to that.
I think let me just pick on what you said. What you said is actually like very, very interesting, especially around the AI application area. I think one of the ways I think Africa is separated, or one area I think separates Africa from the rest of the world, is the sheer amount of problems we have. In fact, I think there was this particular conference we went to together, and then he said that here you can make incremental progress, but in Africa you just look at your side, you see problems.
You can just pick up the stone and see a problem.
So the sheer amount of problems is actually very, very interesting, because it gives a broad pool of possibilities where AI applications can be very practical to solve problems. You mentioned healthcare, agriculture, and what have you. And I think this is a very unique perspective for us in terms of, okay, if from the downstream AI application, we are seeing that there are problems that some of these existing models can even help us solve. It creates a use case for entrepreneurs even coming in to begin startups at that downstream level, which eventually drives investment, which eventually drives markets, which eventually now starts driving that infrastructure. It should essentially be, I actually would have thought it would be logical. You build the infrastructure. But now it's really like, oh, you want to start fresh from the market and see.
It's not about Samsung.
So you start from the market because again, you have these amazing application possibilities that you can essentially utilize some of these models and build a business case around it. Start driving investment into it, and maybe, just maybe, we can be able to start driving those conversations with policymakers, with government officials and other allies to start looking at that, look at the African continent and start, looking at ways we can be able to build it more. I think another point I wanted to touch on is more concerted efforts. I think right now we act in isolation too much in Africa. We are like too fragmented in our approach, and in my opinion, I don't think that is like the best way to go around it. I think a more concerted or regional approach would make sense, especially from an infrastructural perspective. I think that would make sense. For example, from the application perspective, just imagine that you build, a use case for which you're using like a use case where you're using an AI application for agricultural purpose. If you're focusing on like the Ghanaian market versus focusing on maybe the entire West African market, it makes more sense from an investment perspective. I know the AFCTA, which is essentially the African Free Trade Agreement, is supposed to make, reduce the barriers to markets. I don't know how that is working practically. I don't know how that is working practically.
No, I mean, like,
I think these are policies that essentially makes,
I mean, talking about policy, right? And I just want us to stop talking about the, move away from talking about the problems, talking about the solution.
Before we move away, I just want to put some numbers to like some of these things, like particularly with regard to the pull strategy from adjacent startups, AI-enabled startups, to building data infrastructure. According to, in 2024, there were about 2,400 AI companies across Africa, pulling in a total funding of over 800 million by just the top 159 AI startups. And there is a projected market value potentially of like $16.5 billion in just Africa AI markets by 2030. And there was this quote by Ted Cabal saying Africa's AI movement has shifted from consumerism to foundational building. Startups are training new models, engineering data pipelines, and building hardware that reflects the realities of low connectivity environments. And imagine like 150 AI startups building this. They want to cut down on costs because, someone will come there and say, oh yeah, I can do it for you better. I can build the infrastructure, or you just need to just pay me a fraction of what you do.
We need more quantity of startups.
Yes,
we need more activity going on.
To create that need. For the infrastructure, for the data, for the data, for data sourcing and whatnot, but also for the GPU clusters, the infrastructure that we could then drive even innovative models. But I
mean, just segue to the to solution right now. I know we've been touching about it, but if you're in the elevator with the Minister of Digital Innovation in Nigeria, and let's just assume it's the Minister for Digital Innovation in Africa, right? What would you tell him?
Okay. Well, a lot of things.
You're the elevator with him.
Do you want to speak about 1 minute?
Yes. Like 1 minute, 30 seconds. If you're with him in the elevator and like you're going to the 7th floor and the 1st floor. What are you gonna tell him?
A lot of things are in my mind, but okay, I would just focus on these key things. I think one of the things we've touched here, which I think is very important, is to start paying attention to practical solutions using the existing models we have, or ways we can be able to implement that, like improve what we currently have to solve practical problems in Africa. I think there's this company, InstaDeep, I think it's Tunisian or Egyptian, that's exited uh, years ago for almost $1 billion. I think it was $600 million. Called AI startup, built from Africa by Africans, and had a kind of exit value. I think a couple more companies like that are coming online, and they're going to be doing amazing stuff. I think it's a case of putting that concerted efforts to figure out companies, high quality founders that are building practical applications from Africa. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is building upon that success. We want to start looking at ways we can be able to solve our key infrastructural problem: electricity connectivity. These are things we have to start putting in place, because you can't really scale.
It should be like an emergency.
It should be an
urgency. Let's get that sorted out.
We need to get that sorted out.
Yeah.
And that part again is talent. I think we need to put in a couple of programs and really implement, because I think we have very good policies, but implementation is a big challenge to be able to attract and retain some of the talented people, and also keep training people into the space. Another important point I want to talk about is how are we engaging corporates and academia, that incorporation. I think it's going to be an important part as we keep pushing the boundaries.
Do you think this is what policymakers do you think policymakers, government have a role to play?
Yes, I think they definitely have a role to play, definitely, because you can do this by targeted policies, maybe tax credits to corporate organizations that actively engage academia, or maybe that actively invest in R&D specific area, like AI related research work. I think this is something that is important. You can even mandate students to go for internship and give them waivers in different ways, so that students have context in how they want to build some of the things or research in these areas and improve their competency. I think that gap between academia and corporates needs to be bridged for us to even move our technology generally, not just AI, but I think
really good
across different technologies.
Now, let's switch to corporates. I want to ask, if you're with Dangote, who's the richest black man in the world, and his efforts has a ripple effect on how business think and entrepreneurs think, right? What would you tell him about AI, and what advice would you give him, or what plea would you have for him?
How much time do you have? Is this an elevator ride?
Yeah, let's say.
Because I don't know. I mean, am I in Burj Khalifa? A few minutes. But yeah, I've got how much time?
2 minutes. Maybe.
Okay. I think I would emphasize some of the points that I mentioned, talent. And I feel from someone like Dangote does sit in a position that he can invest in the talent, essentially building offshoot programs that train people en masse in AI. I mean, we see ALX, we see what's this AI training company? Yeah, we see ALX, we see a couple other training organizations.
Do you mean old school?
Yeah, old school. That's what I was trying to remember. Yeah. So I would ask him. I would tell him to build that, because that builds the foundational knowledge and targets underrepresented communities. I mean, across Africa. I mean, they've been focusing in Nigeria. They've been focusing on Lagos too much. Let's go to Bono. Let's go to Eritrea. Let's go down south to East Africa. Let's build these things focused on these people. Because the more persons we get understanding or get to understand AI, the chances that they would build something. So I would really, really ask him to invest in talent building. Secondly, and this is more long term, would be setting up funding strategies, from VC funds that essentially is available to both raise startups, right, and help build accelerators to sort of incubate startups, or invest in already established startups who are looking for funding. And the point I'm trying to make using these two is, I understand Dangote is the richest. Is richest by the second by far, right? But there is so much money and there is so much value and legacy you can build by building the ecosystem around it, by enabling people to do stuff. And right now that we're moving into a more Africa, we're moving into a more information infrastructure-led era. There is going to be relatively less reliance on like some of the core modes of Dangote today when it comes to cement and like hardware stuff, right? So I would just present him talent and funding as like the thing. If you could start with talent, I mean that's something we can pull up in like a few weeks. Put out the marketing, put in distribution, get that started, and then set up like proper funding strategies for incubating and investing in like growing startups.
Nice. I mean, I like your point about having him set up like this VC fund, because I don't know, does Dangote has a VC fund?
I think the question you ask is, does anyone? I think the closest we have is this Tony Elemental Foundation.
Oh
yes,
yes. That's the closest.
That was the model I had
Yes,
in mind.
that's that. But I think again, like I think more can be done.
More can be done.
Yeah, more can be done.
More can be done. Like a couple more people can come together and make it a bit more targeted to areas. I know they want to be as broad as possible because we have problems everywhere. Like even like the urgency of this AI era, it's something that I think effort needs to be made so that we can win or at least have a share.
Have a share.
Table.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things we didn't touch on was like the social impact of AI models getting really good, but AI being used at large. And the impact in terms of labor is crazy.
This is not worried.
And given that Africa in the next couple of years is going to be like, I think it's the one in every year. It's going to be the youngest population.
Yes.
It'll be like the laborer to the world.
Yeah.
At this point in time where AI now becomes like really a thing, like it's really not it's not to our advantage because labor might increasingly not be a competitive advantage, which places us at a big disadvantage or could potentially put us in good. So it makes sense to start thinking about that future and figuring out a way we can be able to still compete given our large and increasingly
that's really good.
Hopefully Dangote sets up an AI fund that makes you the fund manager.
Well, probably I'm not enough to that would be really good.
That would be AI fund manager. Lastly, before we just wrap it up, it's spoken about the government, spoken about business and entrepreneurs. What would you say to a 19-year-old right now in University of Ghana? What are you going to tell that person to be doing right now to get prepared for this world of AI?
Definitely think about it. But beyond that, I think that one of the again, this might evolve with time, but one of the things I want to put is in whatever aspect of life or whatever area of concentration you are, just think about how it connects or how artificial intelligence can be useful in making things maybe better or faster there. I know there is this cliche that AI will not steal jobs, it does that, it's just steal jobs.
It's still your job.
I don't believe that. But I think one way to control your future is to look out for ways you can be able to create new value within your own area of competence. So it makes sense to start thinking about, I'm not just studying medicine, but how can I utilize AI to make maybe this practice in medicine better? I think that might be one way to create value. Another second thing again I want to talk about is actually financial literacy. I know it sounds stupid, but it is very important. I think one of the things that African students can improve is their financial literacy and financial literate abilities. Start looking at how you can invest in markets so that you can even participate in the wealth and value creation that AI companies are going to create, so you are not left out totally. Start looking at, how do I participate in the capital markets? How do I participate in other kind of markets? Start building those skills really early on. Start understanding how finance work, how balance sheets work, how income statement work. It really helps. It's going to help you so that you are not just focused on getting a job after school, and you actually participating in that in terms of capital market. I think that's financial literacy.
You've spoken like a true MBA student, understand how this money movement works. But I want to hear your perspective from more of you're the engineer in the room. What would you, on the technical side, what would you tell a 19-year-old You right now.
So I'll do two things. The first one is sort of cliche, and that's a pretext to the next one. I'll tell them you can really do whatever it is you want to set your mind to do. It's cliche, but like I'll follow that up with bringing them over to Berkeley. Because I mean, I feel when I was 19, that's like some of my most formative years. There is like I was wild with ideas, like thinking about like as far as sci-fi. I mean, that back then, like it was mostly Avengers and like the Marvel. I'm thinking about, okay, is this really possible? Is this really possible? I can imagine people that were 19 here in San Francisco being in the frontier of things and seeing that yes, this is possible. That ticked them the right way. That flipped some switch. So yeah, I think having them experience, I'll bring them into Berkeley or to a place, museums, like place where they can experience like what the frontier looks like, right? Like because it's not something you can necessarily communicate, and I think that would help with the earlier cliche, which is you can do whatever you set your mind to. Okay. So doing that, I mean, the hope is that they've gone through that experience, they've had all the neural signals happen, and they've seen the euphoria and and they when they get back they're able to like think differently, but also with the realization and the assurance that yeah, I mean I was just in Berkeley, it can happen again, it's not a problem. But yes, that's what I would do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ayobami. Thank you so much, Testimony, for spending the time with me today. We are the African Entrepreneurs at Berkeley, and we are a club set out to just discuss the future of the continent, and we realized that we are the ones that would be the next president, the next engineer, the next entrepreneur in the country, in the continent, and
the next Dangote.
The next Dangote. And we want to make sure that we are well prepared for it this time around. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you next week.
Goodbye.